Good morning. This is Milt Thompson, and this is the Milton Thompson YouTube channel. I post a lot of topics on church-related things, spiritual things, such as I have a series on your identity in Christ. I have a series on the gifts of the Holy Spirit. I have another series on the second coming of Jesus. But today I want to start a series that deals with leadership. You know, throughout my life, I've been blessed to fulfill various leadership roles. I've been a pastor of a church, but along with that, I've been a teacher, I've been a principal, I've been a school superintendent, and so, I've had the opportunity to be in a variety of leadership positions. Along with that, and more importantly, I've been blessed to be under some very, very, very good leaders. Whether as my pastor, I've had church leaders who were exceptional, who modeled leadership for me, and I've had superintendents and district leaders who were exceptional leaders. And as a result of that, I guess I've been mentored by some of the best. Now, in this series, I don't want to talk about um, my successes because, to be honest with you, there have been a lot of failures along the way too. And there are things that if I could go back, I would change them knowing what I know now. I'm always amazed when they interview somebody and they ask them the question, do you have any regrets? And they say, no. I wonder, first of all, if they're a human being from this planet, because of course, many of us, most of us, have regrets. And hopefully, as we've been growing, if we could hop in a DeLorean, from back to the future, and go back and change things, we certainly would, because we have more wisdom now. We understand more about ourselves. We understand more about leadership, hopefully. And because of that, we would change certain things. But um, God has a means of dealing with that. It's called forgiveness. Where I failed, there's forgiveness. But there's no way to go back and to change things. And there are people that along the way I've wronged by exhibiting a leadership style that was ineffective or that was hurtful. And it's important for us to be self-evaluating and to realize that not to build on the mistakes of our past and not to perpetuate them. So let me start by saying this. A man that I greatly respect, his name was Jim Spillman. Jim has gone to be with the Lord. I was taking him back from one of the seminars that he sponsored in my church. And out of the blue, he turned to me and he said, when I asked the Lord about what leadership is, and of course, though I was driving, I leaned in his direction because I knew I was going to get, this was going to be one of those gems in life, one of those, precious treasures of wisdom. And he said, well, what the Lord said to me is, leaders lead. Now, at first I thought, oh, what a letdown. I was expecting some broad soliloquy, containing the wisdom of the ages, and all I got was leaders lead. But I've got to tell you, over the years that have passed since that conversation, I've come to realize how profound that really is. And there's so much to leading people. There's so much to leadership that most of the time we miss out on it. So it's my goal in this series to talk a little bit about it. So on this first video, I want to talk about some of the characteristics of effective leaders and hope that if you're in any leadership capacity, some of you lead large numbers of people, some of you lead very small groups of people. Some of you may be leading a Bible study group. Some of you may be leading a church. Some of you may be leading a mega church that has organizational complexity. But I believe that the things that I'm putting out on this video and on the succeeding videos will help you. So, what are the characteristics of effective leaders? And this applies to whether you run a business or whether you're part of a ministry in a church. First thing is they see themselves as being one of the sheep, or they see themselves as just being one of the organization, just like anybody else. They don't have a greater than, less than mentality. You know, most organizations have, including churches, have charts that show a leadership style that's top down, that's a pyramid basically. And I would tell you that if you're a leader and if you think of yourself as the head on top of that pyramid, you probably, if you play out that mentality, will never be an effective leader. And you'll have to govern by fear and reprisal and manipulation and all those other things that are characteristics of negative leaders or ineffective leaders. But if you see yourself as having a function within the church or a function within the organization that's not greater than, but different than others. And if you maintain that you are just one of the sheep who's been given a heavy responsibility and a role, you'll do well as a leader. Effective leaders know that leadership is a calling, and it's a calling from God. It's a responsibility, but it's a calling. And what do I mean by calling? That God, in His grace and in His wisdom, has equipped you, given you the talents, the experiences, and other things to influence and to make an impact, a positive impact, on the lives of other people. And so it's a calling, it's a gift. It's not to be used to gain power, it's not to be used for wealth and for riches, it's to be used to enrich the lives of other people. Effective leaders also realize something else. They realize the limits of their own abilities, talents, personality, and strength. You know, one thing that I've learned, and I've been in leadership capacities and been, as an adult for 40 some years. And the one thing that I've painfully had to come to grips with, that I couldn't come to grips with when I was younger, is the limits of my strengths and my weaknesses, my abilities, what my personality can produce, and all of those things. Now, when I was younger, I saw that as a debilitating thing to consider because I thought, man, how can I lead others unless I am just all sufficient, unless I know everything, unless I have all this multitude of talents to where I can do everything, you know, and have a level of expertise where people can come to me anytime that they're lacking in knowledge because, of course, I know everything that they need to know. And if you lead from that mentality, you will fail as a leader because none of us are complete. And part of that is a God ordained interdependence that He created in human beings. The fact that you are not self sufficient and all sufficient is not a knock on your abilities. So, I've had to come to realize the limits of my own talents, my own abilities, my own personality, my own strengths. And it doesn't bother me to call the opposite of strengths weaknesses because it doesn't damage my ego or reality to acknowledge that I have weaknesses. And over the course of my life, as I've come to grips with what I do not do well, and then as a leader, uh, whenever possible, to hire or to recognize in others the talents or the strengths of the things that are my weaknesses, when I've been able to put together a team of people who have corresponding and complementary strengths and weaknesses, we've gotten some things done. It's in the last number of years, going to people who were part of my team and deferring to their expertise instead of pretending that I had expertise has been one of the signs of growth in my own life. um, along with recognizing the limits of their own abilities and talents. They maximize, good leaders maximize the talents of others. They look for opportunities for other people to shine. And when, as a leader, and let me give you an example. When I was superintendent in Beloit, we were faced with a large budget deficit. And I had this idea I'd been carrying around for a long time, and it was to create a district that had all of these academies. So you would have a school of world languages, and you would have a school of science, and you would have a school of, you name it, of fine arts. So my vision was that since we had to restructure in Beloit, that would be the model that I would pursue. So I sat down with my leadership team, and we talked about it, and we talked about it, and we talked about it, and because they were respectful of me, and we were friends. We'd go out to lunch together. We'd spend time together. Um, they humored me and played around with my idea. But it reached a point where even I knew that wasn't the best idea. So instead of trying to sell my idea, I opened up our cabinet meeting to looking at other possibilities. And one of my assistant superintendents came up with an idea, and the idea was to restructure the district. It had been a K through 6, uh, 7 through 9, 10 through 12 district, if I remember correctly. And his idea was to restructure to create a K through 3, 4 through 5, 6 through 8, and so on district. When I heard the idea, I knew that it was better than my idea. Now, to be honest with you, when I was younger, I would have fought to the death to implement my idea. But I knew, intuitively, I knew on the inside his idea was better. And so we played out that idea. And we played out the ramifications of that idea financially to the district. We had to close buildings anyhow in order to deal with the budget deficit. And we found that his idea was better. Now, I have a friend, Tim Miller, dear friend, and he once said this in a meeting that corresponds with the story that I'm telling you. He said, the quote was this: "None of us are as smart as all of us." And when he said that years ago, that stuck with me because I've learned that you defer to the ideas of other people. There are people who you're laboring over a solution to a problem, and if you've got a big head, or you're the top of the organization, or you're the pastor, or you're the head elder, or you're the apostle, what you'll do is you'll minimize wisdom that God will give you from other people, because you'll believe that because you are the boss, you are the head, that you are the only source of wisdom and solutions. And if you do that, you will fail as a leader. God surrounds you with other people, and sometimes they have the better idea. So you need to defer. You also need to maximize the talents of other people. When I became an elementary principal in Kenosha, a superintendent gave me charge of an elementary school, Wilson. It was a school they were going to close. And he allowed me to partner with Marva Collins, who was a nationally renowned educator in Chicago, and and to implement some of her model and her ideas. And so, when the school year started, he gave me 6 months to work out the model, to develop the model. But when I started as principal there, um, it wasn't long before I realized that my executive assistant um, was one of the most capable people I've ever worked with. Found out later she and her husband were the head of a farming co-op, and that she did a lot of the bookkeeping and a lot of the planning. And so I sat down a few months in, I sat down with Doreen and I said this. I said, look, here are my weaknesses. I am not a great detail person. I'm more into the vision. I'm more into the big picture. I'm more into how do we implement an idea. But you're a detailed person. So I want you to keep my calendar, any appointments that I have, any things that I need to be reminded of, I hand off to you. Because if I schedule myself, I will invariably schedule myself to be two or three places at the same time. So, when it comes to that, when it comes to, helping oversee the school budget and all of that, I want you to be involved in it. I can almost remember that a big smile came over her face. And the reason for the smile was the fact that she was being empowered to be who she was and to use all of her talents and her strengths. And I'll tell you, our partnership went so well that when I had an opportunity um, to develop a charter school in Racine, and I needed to have an executive assistant who was talented, I asked Doreen if she wanted to come with me, and she did. And that partnership proved to, it maximized my talents. It freed me to do what I do well, and it freed her to do what she did well. If you gave her a list of 30 things to organize, her head was already spinning on how to organize that list of 30 things. I would have sat there for a long, long time trying to bring organization to that list. So you maximize the talents of others. Uh, your success, their success is your success. If you don't learn that as a leader, you're going to labor and you're going to fail a lot of times. And you're going to end up um, having people, you're going to have a turnover of leadership around you and of people around you because they're never going to feel fulfilled or satisfied because you're going to make them serve you instead of serving the talents and the abilities that God has given to them. The other thing that you need to learn as a leader is this, and it deals with your ambitions. You can't see people as stepping stones or pawns to be used to further your career, to further your calling, to further your anointing. God created people because He loves people and because He wants them to fulfill their life's purpose, not just to be a tool that you can use to fulfill your purpose. I've watched leaders, fortunately, again, I have had the model of phenomenal leaders, so I did not see it primarily from them. But over the course of my life, I have seen leaders who've used people as stepping stones, and they've used other people as if they were disposable, like disposable diapers. They suck the talents out of them, they suck the ideas out of them, and then claim those ideas as if they came from them, and then they move up the organizational chart on the backs of the people who shared their talents and their ideas and their wisdom with them. If you do that as a leader, sooner or later that will come back to haunt you. You need to give credit to other people. You need to see that people are more than stepping stones. As a matter of fact, many of the leaders that I've had the privilege to be under ended up having a legacy of leaders that developed under them, whether it was Fred Kirkpatrick, who was pastor of the church that I attended in Great Bend, Kansas. There are many young men who are now pastors and leaders in various churches because of his modeling and because he released us to use our own talents and abilities and the gifts and the callings and anointings that God had given us. Dr. Bill Hoffer, who was one of the first superintendents that I served with as a teacher and as a research assistant in Hutchinson, Kansas. I watched him empower everybody in central office and the principals and others. And as a result, he has a legacy of leaders that he helped develop. And he did not use them as stepping stones Instead, he promoted them, and when they left to take higher positions to become superintendents themselves, he rejoiced at that because he'd been grooming them for that all along the way. So people are not disposable, they are not stepping stones, they're not pawns to be moved around on a chess piece. Now, let me just make one or two other points. And they're exceptional, good leaders are exceptional listeners. They listen more than they talk. Now, I'm a talker, and sometimes I overly fall in love with the, dulcet tones of my own voice, and that's gotten me into trouble. And I've learned more and more, and it's taken a long while, to sit in meetings and to listen rather than to just flap my lips. Good leaders are good listeners. Now, I'm not saying that leaders just sit there and listen and don't interject and don't offer opinions, but what I'm saying is that they're able to listen to others and to empower others to speak and to empower others to synthesize and to process things. They're exceptional listeners, and they seek the counsel of others. When they get stuck, they find people, either within the organization or outside of the organization, that they can bounce ideas off of or that they can use as their sounding board, even for when they feel overwhelmed, especially with that, or when they feel discouraged. Everyone needs someone that they can go to who'll talk to them about it. They also need someone who'll shoot them the straight dope. And that's an expression from the 70s. And what it means is who'll tell them the absolute truth. But it has to be someone that they believe has their best interest at heart. I have friends and I have people that I can go to that will tell me the straight dope. They'll say, there's a disconnect between what you say you want to happen and how you're doing it. And then they help me work through the dissonance between what I say I want to do or what my goal is and the process that I'm using. So anyhow, this is the first of the videos. I don't want to make them very, very long on leadership, and I hope that what I've shared so far has been helpful to you. This is a leadership series. It's going to talk about biblical leadership. Obviously, I've already shared examples of leadership that I've experienced and great leaders that I've had the privilege of working for. And I hope that this helps you to be a more effective leader. God bless you. Apply this. Of course, subscribe to this channel if you see that it's helpful. Leave comments if this is helpful. I can use the building up and the encouragement just like anybody else. So have a great day and go out and lead well.